Good morning and welcome to another special edition of On the Pen. We've got more news to get into that broke last night in the OFA versus FDA trial. Some more filings. We're going to get into them. We're going to get into what Eli Lilly said. Last night, if you joined us, you got the full rundown on the amicus brief filed in the court on behalf of the FDA and Eli Lilly by none other than Novo Nordisk, who obviously has a vested interest in the outcome of this case. If you missed that video or that article, jump over to onthepen.com, the internet's #1 resource for patients looking for information about obesity medicine from the patient perspective. So what did we hear from Lilly last night? Well, honestly, it was so predictable. Really echoing a lot of the things that we heard in the amicus brief from Novo Nordisk. But we're going to get into it. If you are just joining here, I'm Dave Knapp, man on the Manjaro. That's why I'm here. You are on the pen. Wegovy, Saxenda, Victoza, Trulicity, Manjaro, Zepbound, that pen. And we talk about the news here that affects patients. And most of the news that flows down about these medications flows either from the investor world or the medical world. We take that information and put it in a patient-centric way for you here at On the Pen. So if you're not subscribed, please do me a favor and hit the subscribe button. If you haven't hit the thumbs up button, that's your part in this whole deal. I bring the news. All I ask in return is for that subscribe and for that like. So thank you for those who are doing that even now. Thank you for those who are joining live. I want to say good morning to Sue, to Matt, to Woodkirky and Michael, to Julie. Thank you for being here with me this morning. It's good to see you all, VO. Thank you for being here as well. So last night, Eli Lilly had the chance to basically file on behalf of their position in response to the Outsourcing Facilities Association filing for a motion for a preliminary injunction. And there's so much legal speak and lawyer speak to kind of sift through here, but kind of just putting it in normal people talk. Essentially, the OFA, who is suing the FDA basically over their decision to remove tirzepatide from the shortage list to allow them to continue to compound tirzepatide, they have the opportunity while this case is going on to sort of prove to the court their position that they are going to be irreparably harmed if the FDA is allowed to enforce it's allowed to enforce anything against compounders during the duration of this trial till it all gets hashed out. That's called a preliminary injunction, where the court can essentially step in and say, while this trial goes on, the FDA can't do anything. As it stands right now, the FDA had put a deadline out of yesterday for 503As to stop compounding tirzepatide, and March 19th for the 503Bs, the outsourcing facilities who are actually bringing this lawsuit to cease the production of compounded tirzepatide. They actually put out some guidance last week that made it clear that they were going to wait to enforce anything until this preliminary injunction issue was decided in the court. So this is Eli Lilly's response. Of course, Eli Lilly joined this lawsuit with the FDA a few weeks ago, asserting that they had, major interest in the outcome of this case. And so they brought in their lawyers, and basically this is their response to the OFA asking the court for a preliminary injunction, which would again halt the FDA's ability to enforce anything until this trial is resolved. So they made their position very clear. I mean, as they have over the last few months about their position on compounded tirzepatide. In their filing of this response, they unsurprisingly took a super aggressive stance against compounding. Lilly argues that the FDA was right and within their legal framework to remove tirzepatide from the shortage list, and that allowing compounded versions to remain on the market is both illegal and dangerous, according to Eli Lilly. At the heart of Eli Lilly's argument is a claim that they have done everything necessary to meet the demand of this drug. And that's where I'll just pause and ask to hear from you anecdotally within the community. You know, the more the more it really does appear to me, I try to be as objective as I can in this conversation, but it really does appear to me that the true shortages have been resolved. I am not hearing of people who are having a hard time finding their medicine within a few days, right? With any injectable medicine that requires cold storage, it's normal for a pharmacy to not have it on hand, especially when there are so many doses available. It's not normal if they can't get that to you within a few days because they order from a supplier. And this is Lilly's whole defense here, is that they're able to supply the distributors who are sort of the middlemen in all of this, who order directly from Lilly and stock the pharmacies. So I have not heard of very many people who have struggled to get their branded medication. Now, that is completely anecdotal, but it is based upon now we have a very large following spread out amongst the social medias, right? But we have, for instance, one group, which is 20,000 plus members who are all on either tirzepatide compound, or they're on the branded versions, Mounjaro or Zepbound. But it seems to me like what we're hearing is that it is commercially available, right? So I'm just interested to hear from you in the comments if that's not your case. But the company points to its $23 billion investment in manufacturing and states that since August 2024, it's been producing enough Mounjaro and Zepbound to eliminate any legitimate nationwide shortage. Of course, they point to the fact that they released 2.5 and 5 milligram dose in vials. This seems like a good moment to pause and just tell Lilly, just put a stop to this nonsense, release all the vials, reduce the price. You know that they can just crank these out all day long in single dose vials. They could lower the price. Then everybody gets branded medication. They get, a safer version of these medications. Just do it. Just do it. Why do we have to go through all this nonsense? Why do patients have to suffer in this anxiety? Just release all the vials, release them all. If the 2.5 and 5 milligram dose help to resolve the shortage, what could the upper doses do for accessibility? Reduce the price, release all the vials. This is absolutely absurd. But of course, we're going to drag on and probably won't get those until this is all resolved. Lilly argues that the FDA independently reviewed the data and correctly determined that the compound tirzepatide is no longer necessary under federal law. That would be the 503B version, the mass-produced version. We've gone over this a million times, but essentially 503Bs, outsourcing facilities that are bringing this lawsuit. We'll get into, Lilly even contest that a bit, which is interesting. They have the ability to mass produce medications that are under a patent if those medications are in shortage to help meet demand. That's literally the spirit of the law with the 503B designation. And what Lilly is arguing here is that they no longer need to do that because these shortages are resolved. So, of course, Lilly's filing is also packed with warnings about the potential dangers of compounded tirzepatide. Of course, there's no distinction when Big Pharma talks about compounds. There's no distinction between the super sketchy gray market far reaches of the internet versions of these medications that come without a doctor's prescription, that come from who knows where, that are sold for very cheap that people reconstitute in their own home versus something that comes from a 503B pharmacy, which is FDA overseen by the current goods and manufacturer process. They're required to source their API from FDA approved sources, et cetera, et cetera. There's no distinction between those two things, right? That spectrum, they just call it all the same because that works within the framework of the argument that they're trying to make. So it's packed with warnings about risky knockoff drugs. They cite multiple safety issues, including sterility problems, bacterial contamination, and mislabeled products that have led to recalls and public health warnings. The company also takes aim at compounders who use unregulated or chemically modified versions of tirzepatide. This would be the custom formulations, custom doses. I think this is another indication, not that we needed one, but another indications of what they will do if compounding is ended of tirzepatide through however this case is resolved. You've heard from multiple telehealth companies. You've heard from the pharmacies that supply patients with the actual compounded drugs that they're just going to lean on custom doses and custom formulations of the commercially available products. So instead of maybe a 2.5 milligram dose of Zepbound, you're going to get something that's maybe 10, 11% higher, something in between that 2.5 and 5 milligram dose, or they're just going to mix it with something else, like a B12 vitamin is something that you see typically. And so what Eli Lilly is saying here is that those formulations do not meet the quality standards of the FDA approved versions of Mounjaro and Zepbound. Not anything that is surprising that they would say that, but I think that just telegraphs they're going to go after those hard. So if you're going to rely on those versions of compounds for access to this medication, I don't know how it's all going to play out. And that concerns me. We put out an article at onthepen.com this week about just ways that you can fight insurance to get approval for Zepbound. It's a great article. I think a wonderful resource for the community. If you want to go check it out, it just lays out, basically if you're denied for Zepbound, here are your options depending on your situation, right? And I've laid it out very simple for you. Of course, if you want to find out if you're covered for branded medications, you can go to Roe's Insurance Checker tool. Just Google Roe Insurance Checker. You just pump your card in there and they'll send you an email that tells you what you're covered for. But if you go through the process and sign up with a company like Roe, who is a sponsor of On the Pen, the podcast here, I'm hearing from the community every day of more and more people that are getting approved for the branded versions of the medication. And then of course they offer the single dose files of Zepbound, 2.5 and 5 right through their Roe platform. There's other telehealth companies that will also help you fight the battle for branded medication. I mean, to me, that's probably the best track to take right now. Is everything is so uncertain, but I realize that everybody has different situations. So this is just an ugly situation and sort of indefensible. I think that Lilly has the ability to release higher dose files, bring the cost down, and that they haven't. Super frustrating from the patient perspective for sure, but we'll continue on in this filing here. Lilly directly challenges the compounding industry's evidence for keeping tirzepatide on the shortage list. This is an interesting take here because basically what they're arguing is that the compounders have relied on just anecdotal patient reports, misleading screenshots, I'm quoting here, and incomplete surveys rather than objective data. So Lilly here is basically knocking the fact that people have reported the shortage. We had the hashtag campaign report the shortage. Obviously that didn't matter to the FDA. They removed tirzepatide anyway. So I think that they're just saying that patients not being able to find their medicine is not tantamount to a shortage. And I would agree to the extent that, like I mentioned before, if you can't find your medicine within a day or 2 or 3 days, I think is reasonable. Then there's probably a shortage at the distributor level. And if there's a shortage at the distributor level, if they can't get their meds from Lilly, then there's a shortage. But the problem is that this whole process, nothing is clean cut, and nothing about this process was designed to actually deal with something of this magnitude. Nobody, when they wrote the laws for 503B or 503A, nobody foresaw a drug that half of Americans could benefit from, and a good number of those people would want to be on. And even with the massive production investments, both Eli Lilly and Novo Nordisk in the 20 billions of dollars have expanded their manufacturing capacity. Shoot, Novo Nordisk just acquired Catalent, which is one of the largest providers in the world of pharmaceutical drugs, typically in the form of generic versions of the drugs. But they had 3 giant finish and fill factories that Novo Nordisk netted in this deal. The deal was actually Novo Holdings purchased Catalent and then sold off these 3 finish and fill sites to Novo Nordisk. So, I mean, they're doing everything they can, but every time they turn around at an earnings call, they're talking about, both Lilly and Novo Nordisk are talking about how they will struggle to meet demand. So they're sort of speaking out of both sides of their mouth. So it's hard to know what the actual truth is and what the bottom line is here. But that just underscores the importance of how this case is interpreted and how it's determined. And hopefully we can petition our leaders within the government, our representatives, to bring some more clarity to this whole process, because at the end of the day, it's just like anything else. When we struggle to get the insurance company to pay the pharmacy or to pay our doctor bill, who's in the middle? Patients. The insurance company tells you to call the doctor tells you to call the insurance company, and you're just stuck in the middle, just pulling your hair out. The same sort of thing here. Like, nobody really knows exactly what is going on because there's no clear-cut process to deal with this. And so who's in the middle struggling? It's patients again. And quite honestly, it's just a frustrating place to be. And frustrating would be the understatement of the century. The company claims that compounders, the FDA gave compounders an opportunity to present real supply chain data, but found their submissions lacked credibility. Lilly accuses compounders of intentionally ignoring wholesale inventory levels while focusing on isolated pharmacy level issues to manufacture a false shortage narrative. It's interesting because I'm curious to know, and so much of this response is redacted. The entire response, so the FDA and Lilly are both, the defendants in this lawsuit. The entire response that the FDA filed is redacted. It's under seal. In other words, it's not even available for us to look at, which I find fascinating. But when was this information given to the FDA? Because this is a moving target here, right? It's not like the shortage is just resolved and it's resolved forever. And I kind of feel like that's what this case is leading to, is a permanent decision. Well, does that mean that this drug will never and could never ever be in shortage again? Well, kind of, because the whole process again wasn't designed for this, and it's just kind of an honor system process of the pharmaceutical companies reporting to the FDA out of the goodness of their heart. That's problematic to me, because again, who gets harmed in that are patients. There needs to be complete transparency in this process, and there just is not. And the patients suffer. We suffer. So I'll continue on here. Lilly is pushing back against the idea that the OFA and Pharmacia, who is sort of another interested party on the plaintiff side, don't have standing to sue. So this is interesting. Lilly argues that the OFA has not proven harm to its members, and that Pharmacia, as a 503A pharmacy, is not legally allowed to mass produce tirzepatide under shortage exemptions. This is a direct attempt to undercut the entire legitimacy of the case before the court, even before it considers these bigger legal questions. So I don't know. I was under the impression that Pharmacia had a 503B element to its operation. So that's curious to me, and I obviously need to do a little bit more digging there. But if that is the case, why not, as a co-plaintiff, bring another 503B? But again, I've got to get more clarity on that, because that just seems silly to me. But Well, we'll find out more as this unravels here. The filing also makes it clear that Lilly sees compounded tirzepatide as a direct threat to both patients and the pharmaceutical regulatory system. The company argues that allowing compounders to continue selling tirzepatide undermines the exclusivity protections granted to the FDA-approved drugs and that it weakens the oversight that ensures patient safety. Lilly warns that granting the preliminary injunction would cause irreparable harm to them by allowing unapproved versions of its own medication to remain on the market. So we've covered that as well. When a drug receives a patent, the patent is good for a period of time, but not really. I can't remember whether it's 20 years or something. I don't know if it's even quite that long. But there's a difference between market exclusivity and the patent. The market exclusivity is how long a company is given, basically what it sounds like, exclusivity to sell that drug on the market in the US, right? After that period of exclusivity is up, the patent is open to challenges, which could allow a bioequivalent on the market or a generic, let's say. I'm not sure I'm using the exact nomenclature here, but it would allow the patent to be contested if the patent is defeated in court. Then before the patent even is expired, a generic could hit the market after that market exclusivity. So all they're guaranteed is that market exclusivity time. Of course, right now, Novo Nordisk and Eli Lilly are facing competition in the market for both semaglutide and tirzepatide because of the shortage. So they're not sort of from their position extracting all the value out of their product that they could be during its market exclusivity time because of the compounded version. So that's sort of what they're arguing here, is that is what is being undermined in this process. But again, so much of this just goes back to the issue at stand. As the law is written, 503Bs stand to in the gap for patients so that they can maintain accessibility to these medications when there is a shortage. So it all comes down to, how do we define a shortage in a system that was never designed to deal with this? This response sets the stage for the next major moment in the case. Judge Pittman, who is overseeing this trial, as a side note, something that I found very interesting. So Judge Pittman is actually, so that there was a case in December that involved Pfizer, and it involved basically Pfizer receiving basically exemptions on when they had to release certain information about the COVID vaccine. I believe it was somewhere in the ballpark of like 40 years. Don't quote me on this, but where they could keep basically all the information that they had about, potential negative things that were going on with COVID vaccine under wraps for like 40 years. That was, of course, challenged in court, and it was challenged, I believe, in Judge Pittman's court. And I believe it was Judge Pittman who actually demanded that Pfizer start to release that information, right? So this judge has very unique insight into big pharma and some of the games that are played by big pharma in collusion with the FDA. It's just a very interesting venue for this specific argument to be taking place. And last night, what we saw in the amicus brief filed by Novo Nordisk was actually Novo Nordisk came out and said it was a wild statement. I want to pull it up because I want to get it exactly right here. Again, this is all available at onthepen.com. But basically, the quote from Novo Nordisk was, it called the marketing of compounded semaglutide and tirzepatide the largest uncontrolled and unconsented human experiment of our time. And I just found that a very interesting sort of emotion invoking, provocative statement for this specific venue, right? It seems like this judge has really wanted to get this off of his docket. One of the interesting things that we've seen, basically by virtue of we had a correspondent in the courtroom for one of the hearings early on. And basically what that correspondent reported back to me was this judge wants this off of his docket. He wants it out of his court, because basically what he has telegraphed is, doesn't matter how I rule here, this is going to an appeals court. So let's just get this done. That's why I believe we'll have a ruling on the preliminary injunction very quickly around the 25th. I don't even know that he will schedule oral arguments. I just think that at this point, his mind is already made up, and a lot of this is just, legal gymnastics that have to take place before it can happen. So we're looking at February 25th as a really important date here. Could it be later than that? I suppose that it could be, but it seems like, based upon what we've seen telegraphed here, that the decision has probably already been made in his mind. Which way that is, I don't know. But I thought it in my heart of hearts, I felt like this has been leaning pretty hard towards the FDA, because the whole argument here is basically the FDA didn't have the authority to do this, and yes, they do. We don't have to like it, but essentially the FDA does have the legal authority to determine whether a drug is in shortage, to evaluate data and determine that. I don't think that that's really a serious matter of interpretation. I think that's the FDA has always done that. Now we could get into, and we've talked about this, we could get into the Chevron case and challenging federal agencies' ability to sort of interpret vague law. I mean, I'm really wading into lawyer territory here, which I'm not. We always like to have our friend Lee fits in. Several episodes with Lee, and we've kind of gone over this, but yeah, I'm sort of stepping in it whenever I get too deep in the weeds here. But essentially, it's felt like this is leaning towards the FDA and Eli Lilly, and so I just found it to be a very provocative statement in this specific court, with this specific judge, and with his specific very recent rulings against Big Pharma. It's like, I don't know. I just found it interesting and noteworthy, right? But let's wrap this up on the Eli Lilly stuff. This response, basically that Lilly gave here and the FDA gave. Of course, we don't have the FDA response; it's under seal. It sets the stage for the next major moment that, as I said, is February 25th. If the court rules in favor of the OFA and Pharmacia, compound tirzepatide will be protected from enforcement while the broader legal battle here continues. If the court denies the injunction, compounders will be at risk right away of FDA enforcement. 503As will be at risk right away. 503Bs will have until March 19th, as the FDA said that they'll go with the later date that they've given, right? Whether that's the ruling on the preliminary injunction or the March 19th date. Of course, 503As have already telegraphed their intention to offer custom formulations and custom doses. I don't think that's the spirit of 503As. That's my own personal opinion. I think the spirit of 503As are to genuinely provide medications for people that are not available commercially. And I think it's going to be very hard for doctors to defend writing prescriptions for incremental dosing that up until now people didn't require. But that's up to doctors to write that or not. But I can assure you of this: those doctors who have written thousands of prescriptions for these telemedicine companies for compounded versions of these drugs, or even branded versions of these drugs, if they're all of a sudden switching to non-commercially available doses or custom formulations when there are thousands of patients that they were seeing before then did not require that, I can't imagine that Lilly's going to let that slide. I imagine those doctors will see some things in writing from Eli Lilly, whether you like that or not. That's just how the game is played. So I think you'll see doctors receiving cease and desist letters. That's really the next shoe to drop. If the preliminary injunction is denied and compound is shutting down, all the patients are hearing from these telehealth companies is, we're going to continue. Yeah, but the next shoe to drop is the cease and desist letters. And what is a telehealth company or a doctor or a pharmacy's appetite to continue to compound custom formulations, custom dosing in the face of Lilly, the Lilly army and legion of lawyers? I legitimately don't know the answer to that. I think some of the larger outfits out there are probably just figuring in the cost of doing business. How long does it take to wrap Lilly up in court over this? Let's go to the mat. There are some, but there's a lot of fly by night telehealth companies, med spas. I mean, there's a lot of crappy ones out there, to be honest, that are really pushing these in I think ways that are pretty sketchy. All you have to do is open up Meta. The Meta ads are the worst offenders. So if you're relying on those kind of companies for access, I don't know. You're going to have to probably look in a different direction. So, yeah, I mean, it's just frustrating all around, right? We bring all the news from the patient perspective. And all I can say about this whole thing is it's beyond frustrating. It's beyond frustrating to be kind of stuck in the middle here. We'll see after the ruling on the 25th. I'm expecting it on the 25th, but I could be wrong about that. It'll be within some time, a short amount of time of the 25th. We shall see. So thank you for joining me here on this live stream. Thank you for keeping up with this. Go to onthepen.com, scroll to the bottom, sign up for email alerts. We dropped this article on this last night. And so you would have had this information last night if you were getting email alerts. The last thing I'll say before we drop off is Eli Lilly, release all the vials, release all of them in all the doses, lower the price. Let's end this nonsense. Let's get branded medication in the hands of everybody who needs them for a reasonable price. It doesn't seem like an unreasonable ask. They can make lots and lots and lots and lots of money, even if they come in at a price for these medications that rivals compound. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. Thanks for joining me today. Appreciate y'all. Hit that subscribe button before you go. Hit the like button and leave a comment. Let me know what you thought of the stream. We'll catch you on the next one.